This is my randomly generated dungeon. Every time I've refreshed the level, I will spawn a new place and I'll have a new dungeon to explore. Items will also be random, so sometimes I'll have potions, sometimes I'll have keys, sometimes I might even have fruit. And I can flick through one at a time, seeing all the different possibilities. So, how do we create this for ourselves? So I'm starting off in a blank construct file, and the first thing I need to do is create what's called a base. So this is just going to be a sprite, and I'm going to give it the name base. And for this, I use that sort of white grid look. I'm just going to fill this in with a random color, say orange. This is going to be the floor of your dungeon. Once you've got that, make note of the size. If you want to make this bigger or smaller, you can. And we're just going to move it to the top. Next, we need a wall, so I'm going to insert a new object, scroll down, grab a sprite, and create a wall. Click, and again, I'm just going to fill this in a block color, this time black. Hit escape, and then I'm going to move my wall to the top as well and resize it a little bit. Now, the way that this tutorial works and the way that we're creating this random dungeon is actually creating individual tile pieces, almost like jigsaw puzzle pieces, that we're then going to put together into a dungeon. So one of my pieces might look like this. So it might have a base here and a wall to the side. I would then copy and paste this, and I'd create a second one, and this one might have it where the wall's in the middle. We're then going to randomly take these and put them into lots of different positions until we have the level that we want. So if I move over to my other project, this is all my tiles that I've created. So my base is instead a grid, and I've got all my different walls in different positions. Actually, what I've done is I've just created 12 different tiles, and then I've copy and pasted them 4 times. Now, in terms of how many tiles you actually need for this to work, there's no way to create new objects with everything attached to it. So that's why we're creating these tiles and then moving them in position. Depending on the size of the dungeon that you want, you're going to need quite a few of these puzzle pieces. So let's take my world, for instance. This is 2000 by 1000. So what I need to do is take both these numbers and divide it by the size of my base. So we'll start with 2000, and we're going to divide it by 250, giving us the value 8. We're going to do the same with 1000. We're going to divide it by 250, giving us the value 4. Times them together, 8 by 4, we get our answer of 24 pieces. 24 pieces needed to make up this dungeon. Now, I've got a lot more than 24, that doesn't matter. It's just going to take 24 of those randomly and put them into my world, giving me my level. So that's your first step. You'll need to go through and create all your different tile pieces. So once we've got our tile pieces, what do we do next? So next we're going to take our base. So I've got mine here, and I'm going to add an instance variable to it. And the first instance variable that we need is called moved. And this is just going to be a boolean, and by default it's going to be false. As we're moving these into position, we want to keep track of which ones we moved and which ones we haven't. The only thing that we need to do at this stage to get this random dungeon to work is just add some walls around the outside. So I've just dragged my walls, put them around the outside, and this just means my player can't leave the level. You could also just take your player, I've got one here, and just edit its behaviors, and you can also add in the bound to layout option, so it can't leave the layout either. So now that we've got our walls and base set up, don't worry about our player. I'll show you how I added that player in just a bit. We can now move on to our code to generate this random dungeon. Now on our event sheet, we're going to start by adding our global variables. So we need 3 of them. We need an X position, we need a Y position, and finally we need the size of those base pieces. So base size, and mine are currently set to 250 by 250. If you want different width and height base sizes, you need a separate variable for this. Because my height and width are the same, I just need that one variable. So first thing we need is to get the onStart of layout event, because we want this to spawn as soon as the layout starts. We're then going to add a blank sub event, and in here we're going to do our first repeat. Now this is going to repeat for the number of tiles across, and to get that number we're going to take the layout width and then just divide it by the base size. So in my case, I've got 2000 across pixel wise, base size is 250, which gives this loop repeating 8 times. Every time this loop repeats, we're going to take a system action and we're just going to set the value of x, and this is going to be equal to the loop index, so what iteration of the loop we're on, times by the base size. This allows us to get a position of where we're going to place each base. The other thing that we're going to do with this is we're going to actually add a bit of a buffer to this, and inside the brackets I'm just going to take the base size and divide it by 2. This just means that it's going to start in the correct spot at the very beginning. If we don't do this, it's going to be 125 pixels to the left, so it's going to be half off screen, half on screen. So this just fixes that. So now we've got that set up, we're going to add a new blank sub event. And now we've repeated for the width, we need to repeat for the height. So I'm going to scroll down, repeat, and we're going to do the same thing again, but this time we're going to use the layout height. And again, we are dividing it by the base size. And exactly the same again, we're going to set the value of y, and this is going to be the loop index times the base size. And then we're going to add in brackets base size divided by 2, so it's no longer half on screen, half on screen. So that's our loop set up. So that's going to loop through every single possible tile position. Now we need to actually start creating these tiles. So I'm going to start by adding another sub event, and I'm going to check if the base has moved or not. So I've got this Boolean variable, click moved, and then I'm just going to invert this. So has the base moved? If it hasn't moved, I'm going to take a system check. I'm going to scroll down, and I'm going to pick a random base left from the possible ones that haven't moved yet. So now I've got a random base that hasn't moved yet. I now need to move it into position. So I'm going to add another blank sub event for this. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to check if the base is overlapping a wall. This just means it's going to take all those walls and move it with our base. So it's only going to move the walls that are attached to our base. So we're actually going to move the walls first. So to do this, we're going to scroll down to set position. And we're going to take the x value that we've set up with our 2 loops. And we're going to add self.x, so the walls position. And we want to make sure that the wall's in the same place as where we set up in the tile. So we're going to minus base.x, and this will put it in the correct position relative to where the base is positioned. Same for the y, so y plus self.y, and then minus base.y to put relative to the base. So we've got our wall in position, but if we go into this layout here, I may want a tile that is blank, just to give some room in the level maybe. If I do this, this code will break. So to fix this, what we're going to do is just add another condition to this, and we're just going to check if wall is visible, and then we're just going to make this an OR block. This just means that it will always be true, which means even if you've got a tile that has no walls attached, the code will still execute. Finally, we need to actually move the floor into position then. So this one's nice and simple. We're just going to take our base and set position, and this is going to be x and y. We don't need to do anything else to get relative to the other positions because this is the base. Everything's relative to our base. And then finally, we're just going to go to our base, scroll down, and we're looking for the set Boolean, and we want to make sure that moved is now true. This means when it's picking another random base to move, it won't pick one that we've already put in position. So now if we test this code, you'll see that we've ended up with our random dungeon. It's taking all of those pieces and it's just randomly putting them into the world. And again, you can have more tiles, but you need to at least make sure you've got the minimum tile based on your world size. You've just got to do that calculation we talked about at the start. How do we add random items to this then? So you might have seen already that I've got some items set up. So let's have a look at them now. I've put them in a folder just so they're out of the way. The main thing is this item here. So if I edit the animations for this, you'll see that I've just wrote the word item. This is just for my benefit. It can be anything you like. And I've got some animation frames. So I've got a potion, a key, and an apple. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to randomly place these on the tiles where I want items to spawn, and then I'm going to get to pick one of these at random, and then we're going to do something a little bit clever with those animation frames. So if we look at my tiles already, I'm just going to zoom in. You'll see that I've already placed this item down quite a few times where I want items to spawn. So I've got an item that's going to spawn on this particular tile. If this tile moves, I'm going to place one here. If this tile moves, I'm going to place one here. So first thing we need to do is actually make sure that we're moving that item that we've placed down with these animation frames to have these different items be put in the right place. So just like before, we're going to take this line of code here, add another action, and check if base is overlapping that items. If so, I'm actually just going to take the wall code, copy and paste it, and then I'm just going to replace object, replace the wall with items. And that's it. That means now when I start the level, it will put these in the correct places. The only problem now is that the animation is playing when the game starts, which means I end up with all these apples. So we're going to go back to this on start of layout. We're going to take our items, and it doesn't need to be in a folder. I've just done that for the video's sake. So I've got my items here, and I'm going to start by stopping the animation. I'm then going to add an action underneath it, items, and I'm going to take this once more, and I'm going to set the frame. Now I'm going to set the frame to be a random number, and it's going to be between 0 and we're then going to take the name of it again, so items 2 dot animation frame count, how many different animations there are. I also recommending just rounding this number just to make sure you are getting a whole number, because Construct can be a little bit weird with how it deals with random numbers. That's now picking a random animation frame. So if I play it again, I should get lots of different items. So I've got 2 potions and an apple this time. And if I play it again, I should get a number of items once more. So an apple, a key, and a potion. And if we do one more test, you see I've got a potion and a key. Now it is possible that I can get this first animation being animation 0. So if I want to fix that, I would just change this from 0 to 1. So I can only get those last 3 items. I'm going to keep it as 0 because I'm going to show you what to do if we get that items appear, because I want to do something a little bit different with that. So what we're going to do is add a new event, and we're going to use on start of layout again. Now we could use the on start of layout we've already got. This will just save as a line of code. I like to keep it a little bit separate. So we've got item separate to our spawning logic. We're then going to add a sub event to this. We're going to take our items, that item 2 that we've looked at, and what we're going to do is compare frame. And we're going to check if it's equal to, let's start with 1. Now item number 1, you'll see is my potion. Now if I were doing any logic with the game, I would have to check, okay, are you overlapping item? Is the frame number 1? If so, you're having a potion. This can be a bit tricky with our code. So all we're going to do instead is, if it is frame 1, I've created a new item called potion. So this is just a brand new sprite. And I'm going to take the item and I'm going to get it to spawn in a potion. So this is actually going to spawn in the potion for me where the item is spawned. And then I'm just going to take that original item and destroy it. This means I've got my own separate sprite of a potion without it being just an animation frame from another sprite. And I can repeat this for all my different items. So I can go through and I can say, right, item number 2, which is my key, I'm going to spawn a key. And then item number 3 or frame number 3 would be my apple, so I could spawn that. And then I've got 3 different sprites that have been randomly added that I can apply logic to separately instead of having to check animation frames each time. Now I said what to do if you've got the original item still. What I like to do with a random dungeon crawler is actually take animation frame 0 and just destroy it. So you could place more items than you need to, and there's a 1 in 4 chance, or you could always do if animation frame equals 0 or 1, you could destroy it, and that way it's more or less items might spawn in a particular round than others. So that's our item logic set up. So now we've got items that are randomly spawning, and then it's taking that item that's randomly spawning, deleting it, and replacing it with its own particular sprite that we can then code logic to. What I also recommend is once you've created these objects as well, is just place them into your world so you've got reference for them. So I'll place them in like so, and this is not going to look any different if I hit play, but the big difference again is that we've got individual sprites now in our world. Finally, I've got my player. Let's talk about how to get him in the world, because we can have some issues. So one of the issues that we might have is I've got some tiles, and if I just find an example here like this one, if I spawn my player in, he might get stuck in the middle. We want to prevent that from happening. So how do we fix that? So what we're going to do is go back to our base tile, and we're going to add a new instance variable. Currently we've got one to check if it's moved. We're going to add a new one called Spawnable. And this is going to be a Boolean, and by default, I recommend putting this to true. Once we've done that, we're then going to go through all our tiles, and we're going to decide which ones we don't want the player to spawn on. So you might have one which is got loads and loads of items in. You don't want the player to spawn where loads of items are. Or you might have one where the player is going to be trapped in the wall. I've got two instances of this. I've got this row of tiles here, or this column of tiles, and I've got this column of tiles here. So I'm just holding control to select multiple of them. And spawnable, I'm just going to tick off to say you cannot spawn here. That's all well and good, but our player hasn't spawned yet, so we need to fix this as well. So to spawn our player, I'm going to add a new event, and I'm going to start with my player. And I've added stuff like 8 directions, which I'll talk about in just a sec. But all we're going to do now is just check if the player is on the screen or not. So if they're not on the screen, we then want to put them on the screen in a position. So we're going to add a condition. We're going to go for base, and we're going to start by checking Boolean, and the Boolean is going to be spawnable. So is on screen, select a spawnable base. We're then going to add another condition onto this. We're going to system, scroll down, and we're going to pick a random instance of base. So we're spawning in a random position. Once we've got that set up, we can then take the player and just set the position. And this is going to be base.x and base.y. That's all well and good, but we still have some issues. For instance, if we take this cross piece right here, we could spawn right in the center of that, which means that we are stuck in the middle and we can't move. So what I've got is I've got two behaviors. First behavior is I've got is the 8 directions. And what I've done with that is just set the angle to no. This means that I've got better movement for this particular type of game. And then I've got the custom behavior just here. And this one's got an interesting property that we're going to make use of. So what we're going to do is we're just going to add a new action to our player, scroll down till you see the custom options, and we just got this push out of solid. So we're going to push out to the nearest free space that's not a solid object. And if you haven't already, you just need to make sure that you have got the solid behavior on your walls, and this will push it out of the solid. So if you are in a solid object, it will find somewhere to push you out. On the rare case that you somehow get pushed out of the level, our code takes care of that by checking if you're on the screen. If not, moves you back to a spawnable place. And if we hit play, we've got our finished code. Now this still has some issues. There'll be some level or some parts of the level that aren't accessible. For instance, there's a key that I can't get to because the two pieces that are spawned near each other just happen to be pieces that don't work with each other and end up blocking off the level. So you can get situations where you block off parts of the level and you can't get to it. You might even trap your player in a small area, but that's sort of the risk with creating these randomly generated dungeons. Obviously, we can go far more complex and we can start creating programs to check if it's solvable and if not, refreshing again. I'm going to keep it really, really simple today. So this code will be available on my website if you want to have a look at this in a little bit more detail. But essentially, we're creating a random dungeon using tiles that you've created yourself with random items that you can spawn in and you can program separately. If you've enjoyed this video and you enjoy construct tutorials, please subscribe to the channel, like the video, and I'll see you in the next one.